Dr. Johnson. Dr. Johnson occupies a commanding position in the literature of his day. He was the chief writer of the so called classical poetry in the mid 18th century. He carried on the tradition of the satire in his two poems, London and the Vanity of Human Wishes. His first poem, London, is a gloomy picture of the metropolis as he found it. In it, he depicted the vanities and scenes of the city life. In his second poem, The Vanity of Human Wishes, Johnson appeared to be a convinced Christian from assailing parliaments and the vices of London. He passes to expose the vain hopes, wishes, and effort of humanity. Johnson was an uncompromising classicist. He was didactic and sententious, but as the objects of his scorn were manners rather than people, he came near to Juvenal than to Dryden or Pope. He was not only a poet but a prose writer of the first water. His prose works may be divided into two classes, those in which he is primarily a moralist and those in which he is primarily a critic. His The Rambler, The Idler, and Rascals belong to the first category, while the dictionary, Shakespeare, and the lives of the poets belong to the latter group. The essay in The Rambler deals with a great variety of subjects, but the treatment is always serious, that of moralist and a learned in classics. Like Addison, Johnson created characters in the essays, but Johnson's characters are little more than humors. Russell's for a novel is short. The story, in fact, is merely a framework on which to hang Johnson's own philosophy. There is hardly any incident, and the characters are few. Johnson's criticism, like Dryden's and Addison's, was what is known as judicial or dogmatic, not appreciative. The critic sat as a judge and gave his verdicts upon authors according to his understanding of the law and precedents. The law was the rule of neoclassicism, the precedent the example of the ancients, but he usually interpreted both with rare good sense. Being a critic, he sat on the judicial bench of criticism, inquiring into the beauties and faults of literary works, pronouncing with great accuracy on the merits of literary productions. He has been looked upon as a traditionalist and a belated neoclassicist. Thus, his critical method was diametrically opposed to that of the Romantic Revival. Johnson treated the poets as the schoolboys who were chastised very badly. He used to apply to the books under few certain set standards, but the new criticism started by Wordsworth and Coleridge aimed at imaginative interpretation of literature rather than a magisterial regulation. His dictionary marks an epoch in the history of English. It enables English to claim a place in the literary polity of Europe. Before dictionary, nothing had been done to claim for English an equal place with Italian or French in the literature. But there is a flaw in his criticism on Shakespeare. He overlooked the sublime and elevated poetry of Shakespeare. Besides, he preferred the comedies to the tragedies of Shakespeare, but their defects are attributed to his training in the Augustan tradition. Yet his contribution to Shakespeare criticism is noteworthy. The Lives of the Poets is Johnson's last, largest, and most popular work. It was written to please himself. As a result, the lives are easily written, full of anecdotes and incidents. In its 3 volumes, Johnson gives us biographical and critical studies of 52 poets. In the history of prose style, Johnson's criticism is significant. He illustrates the tendency of the time to write ornate prose. He developed an individual vocabulary heavy with Latinism and marked by elaborate sentences. The special style was called Johnsonese.